Welcome back to the Real Estate Replay, where we rewind the drama, decode the jargon, and shine a big old spotlight on what's really happening behind the real estate curtain. I'm Wendy, your host, your truth teller, and your real estate rebel, which is a total Easter egg if you're wondering where the hell we've been and why we haven't put out podcasts. We've been a little busy building something else. But I'm also your favorite thorn in the side of shady industry practices. All right, buckle up because today we're diving into a sneaky little strategy that's flying under a lot of people's radars. Pocket listings, specifically how they're being used in a power grab that leaves buyers and sellers in the dark. So let's be honest, the growing battle over pocket listings isn't really about consumer privacy or seller choice. It's about power, market share, and which companies get to control access to the inventory. This debate has become loud, messy, and filled with talking points that sound so consumer friendly. But when you look behind the curtain or read their investor earnings calls, it's clear some major players are using choice as a cover for expanding their own reach. This podcast might be a little bit long, but I think it's really important for home sellers and home buyers to understand when you see a news article or talk to an agent to sell or buy, you understand the actual goals of these companies before making a decision of who to work with. So first, let's talk about what's a pocket listing. A pocket listing is a home that's for sale but kept off the public market, only shared usually within the agent's own brokerage or behind a private network that you either need to work with an agent to see or give up most of your information to even access it online. That means fewer buyers ever see it, which can lead to less competition and potentially a lower sales price. It's a strategy that often benefits the brokerage more than the seller, as keeping the deal in-house can double dip their commissions. And while there are cases where pocket listings serve a real need, like for sellers who require deep privacy, this practice is often used in ways to prioritize brokerage profits over consumer outcomes. So before we get into all of this, I think it's really important that you understand the players in the game because they all have consumer-facing messages telling you why they're right. But I want you to understand what they really want and why they're pushing so hard. Player number one, the MLS has entered the game, and they are the keeper of the listings and the rules. There are over 500 multi-list services across the U.S. They're basically a digital backbone where agents upload listings that get distributed to other agents, other brokerages, and consumer-facing websites like Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, and even Redfin. Most MLSs are owned and operated by local realtor associations, though a small number are controlled by brokerages or nonprofits. These systems were originally built not for consumers, but for brokers to keep one another informed about homes that were for sale and to ensure cooperation, including at one point the enforcement of rules like mandatory buyer agent compensation offers, a practice that was totally ripped to shreds in the recent NAR settlement. Appraisers also rely on the MLS to access accurate data for comparable home sales and valuations, adding another layer of dependence on these platforms. Now, over time, thanks to mounting pressure from these lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny, data that was once kept within the MLS has become more publicly accessible through third-party real estate sites, which you'll mostly be told are called portals. These sites like Zillow, Realtor.com, which is owned by News Corp, pay licensing fees to MLSs to access the listing data. But those feeds come with strings attached, such as the, quote, optional rule that kept for sale by owner listings separate or hidden from the MLS feed listings on public portals, which apparently has finally gotten pushed back together. So why would an MLS resist pocket listings? Because pocket listings threaten their control and very existence. The fewer listings in their database, the less valuable their data feeds become. This weakens the leverage over where and how listings are displayed and ultimately who benefits from that access. Whether we actually need 500 some MLSs in this country, spoiler alert, we don't, is a separate debate. But when listings go off market, the MLSs lose data, power, and relevance, which raises a big question. Whose data is it really anyways, and who should control it? Don't get me wrong, centralized listing data is a critical need for homebuyers trying to make informed decisions and for sellers trying to reach the most amount of buyers. But just as important as it is to have that centralized data, it's also just important to decide who governs it, who owns it, and who protects the consumer's interest in it. And right now, that's still up for debate. Enter player number 2, Zillow, the gatekeeper of buyer attention and agent leads. Zillow recently took a public stance against Compass, who is a real estate brokerage, and other brokerages that are experimenting with pocket listing platforms, sites designed to market homes privately before giving all buyers access. According to reports, Zillow will begin refusing to display listings that were initially marketed as a private exclusive by a brokerage, but then flipped to be publicly promoted without being in the MLS. While this full policy has yet to be released, Zillow's rollout seemed intentional. A soft launch to win over homebuyer support, pressure brokerages, crowdsource industry feedback, and patch any loopholes before the full enforcement kicks in, which is supposed to be this May. But here's what buyers and policymakers need to understand. Majority of Zillow's business model hinges on listing visibility and buyer traffic. It's estimated that half of Zillow's revenue comes from selling buyer leads to real estate agents. And these aren't cheap leads. Many agents agree to give Zillow up to 40% of the commission they make when working with you as a buyer lead generated from their platform. And we'll also include the link to show you how much Zillow makes in each city, just so you're aware of what's happening in your area. Zillow is the most visited real estate site in the US, pulling in more traffic than all other platforms. To keep that lead in their lead selling revenue, they need to display as many listings as possible. Pocket listings threaten that, and if brokerages start siphoning off listings to private site, Zillow loses its crown jewel, control over buyer eyeballs. And when buyer traffic dips, so does the revenue made from those expensive leads they sell to agents. So while Zillow's anti-pocket listing stance may sound consumer first, make no mistake, it's also a defensive move to protect its dominant market position and billion-dollar lead funnel. Player number 3, Compass, a brokerage chasing market share by controlling the inventory. Fresh off of a major lawsuit settlement and agreeing to pay over $50 million to resolve claims that brokerages harmed home sellers, Compass is now pivoting its messaging to focus on, quote, seller rights. But is that really why they're pushing for more pocket listings? Let's find out. As we've said before, what companies say to consumers is often very different than what they say to investors. It's worth reminding you that a lot of these big corporations report to shareholders, and shareholders want one thing: money. So take Compass's recent earnings call this past February, where the strategy became crystal clear: use exclusive inventory to lure buyers and grow market share. Their CEO told shareholders that Compass believes more buyers will come directly to Compass because of their, quote, unique inventory and integrated platform. The exact quote is, by growing our unique inventory and marrying that with our end-to-end platform, which has agent-level search and consumer search at a level that no other brokerage firm in the industry has, we believe more and more buyers will search Compass.com and use Compass agents. You can already see this strategy play out on social media, where agents are using private listings as lead magnets to attract buyers. There was a great example by Mike Delpreet. God, Mike, I can never say your name right. I'm sorry. Who recapped Compass's IPO pitch deck. And in it showed multiple social media slides talking about coming soon listings, hidden listings, and many social media posts by Compass agents talking about how they have inventory on private Compass platforms that you will never get listed on Zillow or Redfin. Get yourself a Compass agent or miss out. It's that simple. And behind the scenes, there's even more chatter going on. We've heard from one Compass agent who claimed their manager, their broker, is encouraging them to funnel every listing into the private exclusive program first. That's the program in which you cannot see it unless you are connected to a Compass agent. That is a far cry, in my opinion, from seller choice. If this were truly about protecting seller privacy and seller rights, why the internal push to make private exclusives the default? And the exact quote was, I've been vocal to my manager that I'm not using private exclusive. He's out here asking that everyone put their listings into private exclusives first. Yay, seller rights. Word on the street is that allegedly Compass is exploring selling early access to their private listings to a major public portal. If these listings are meant to be private for the seller's sake, why shop them to the highest bidder for mass exposure? And even in their own earnings call, because that's always where you will find the real reason, the motive peeks through. Compass is exploring ways to monetize private exclusives or coming soons. In that same earnings call, You'll see an investor on the call asked Compass CEO if down the road Compass would potentially get a licensing fee from cross-posting its private listings to portals, allowing the company to, quote, perhaps charge for access while keeping the negative insights off those listings. The CEO didn't answer the question directly, but said there were, quote, wonderful, beautiful things, quote, that come along with the private listings initiative. I can only hear that quote in a Trump voice. Like, we got the biggest listings, the best listings. They're beautiful. We do it the best. All right, I'm done with politics. So let's talk about player number 4. And I'm going to lump a big group of people together for this one. And that's other brokerages fighting for survival and fair access. Since Zillow's announcement about cracking down on private exclusives, some larger brokers have publicly backed the move, framing it as a win for homebuyer transparency and a check on Compass's drive for growth and market share. But let's be honest, most brokerages already have their own version of a private listing/office exclusive program. Some are just more aggressive about it and using it than others. Howard Hanna, for an example, has been notably proactive about this in my area. This isn't about consumer protection, it's about self-preservation. Brokerages, especially smaller and mid-sized ones, know exactly what's at stake. If one major player locks down exclusive control over a large share of listings, it threatens the entire ecosystem. Small brokerages could be shut out of inventory, lose relevance, and ultimately get pushed out or swallowed up by the bigger fish. In short, it's not just a debate about transparency, it's a fight for access, market viability, and survival in a landscape that's becoming exclusive by design. Player number 5, Homes.com. The challenger looking to win with, quote, all the listings. Homes.com is owned by CoStar, and it's made it clear they're coming for Zillow's throne. Last year, Homes.com spent an estimated $1 billion on marketing to try and get your attention and buy their way to the top of the consumer portals. They have yet to grab Zillow's reach and now fight with Realtor.com on who's actually sitting in the number 2 spot. Their whole pitch is built on being the opposite of everything Zillow represents. No lead reselling and no agent pay to play. Your listing, your lead. And more recently, taking shots at Zillow for trying to limit pocket listings. CoStar's CEO has been openly trashing Zillow's new rule against displaying listings that were first marketed as private exclusive, calling it anti-competitive, which is interesting because technically fragmenting inventory does hurt consumers. Something CoStar used to acknowledge when trying to position Homes.com as the one site that would, quote, show it all. So what changed? There are rumors that allegedly Compass has been in talks with Homes.com to promote their private exclusives on their platform or their coming soons, giving them a wider reach without going, quote, fully public. Remember that quote in the Trump voice? We've got beautiful and wonderful things we can do with private listings. So that would explain a pivot. Instead of pushing back on exclusivity, Homes.com now seems fine with it, so long as it might end up on their website. Homes.com still talks a big game against Zillow's business model, and rightly so. We've called out Zillow's referral fee program and agent ranking system for years. And Andy Florence, the CEO of CoStar, if you're listening, I would love nothing more than you to take your legal war chest and your billions of dollars and go after the whole paper brokerage system, whether it's Zillow, Dave Ramsey, HomeLight, Home and Money, Best Agent Finder. They all eventually lead consumers into a referral fee platform that often isn't explained. And in fact, some claim it's a free service to connect you to, quote, said agent. The best agent, right? The best, the beautiful agents. Do it. Take on the industry and take down the paper brokerage system. I'll be honest, I don't think anyone's actually going to take on the referral fee paper brokerage system because it makes this industry a crap ton of money. And once you take down that way to make money, there's no way to get it back. So I don't think people who are building a giant exclusive listing platform and getting a ton of leads want to close that door just yet. Do it, Andy. Do it. All right, player number 6. The National Association of Realtors. Protecting power, not just policy. So a few years ago, when NAR introduced the Clear Cooperation Policy around 2019, it was framed as a way to ensure fairness and transparency in the housing market. But the real motive is preservation of power. Most MLSs are either owned by or tied closely to local realtor associations. And in many cases, the MLS access is actually bundled with a NAR membership. If listings start disappearing into private networks or broker controlled platforms, NAR risks losing control of the data and the dues that come with it. And we know they love their due fees because they got a lot of lawsuits to pay for. To stay relevant, NAR needs listings to remain inside the MLS system. So it created a policy to keep them there, but carved out a big exception: office exclusives. That loophole allows agents to quietly market listings within their own brokerage as long as they don't advertise it publicly. This loophole did give sellers the option to have privacy, but that privacy also allowed large firms like Compass and the many, many, many others. Like, I legit don't know any brokerage that doesn't have some sort of office listing program, to build an entire business model around internal exclusivity without technically violating NAR's rules. So while NAR claimed to be curbing pocket listings, it left the door wide open for them, especially if you had a big enough office. This wasn't just about protecting consumers, but about protecting NAR's grip on the system. So now that all our players are on the board, let's be honest, none of them are purely looking out for consumers, except for a few true consumer groups like the Consumer Advocates in American Real Estate and the new Consumer Policy Center. These groups weren't consulted, didn't benefit, and only got involved after shit hit the fan with Zillow's announcement, speaking out solely because it affects you, the consumer. And on a little side note, I'm involved in both of those organizations. Neither one had conversations, was talked to, or advised, or even asked from Zillow before they made their announcement. Neither of them get money from Zillow either. In fact, the Consumer Policy Center is solely funded by the fellows who participate in it. I felt it was worth mentioning that because apparently some people are trying to create some crazy conspiracy theory that someone's in bed with Zillow. And to go a little deeper on these conspiracy theories, you should know that the only time I have ever talked to Zillow was actually after the Consumer Policy Center put out their release about pocket listings. And in fact, the Zillow person told me, hey, I see your posts all the time and know that you're not a fan of our revenue model. So just to clear that up, neither one of these consumer advocacy groups are in bed with Zillow. They don't take money from Zillow. And they're the only true two places that I would consider listening to and talking to if you want to see what's truly in the best benefit for consumers. All right, back on track. So to sum it up, everyone's fighting for their own slice of power, and consumers are being used as the marketing angle. So if you're a home seller, what the hell should you be paying attention to? You may hear that pocket listings or private exclusives are a great way to test the market or maintain privacy. But here's what you need to pay attention to and really consider. Limited exposure equals limited competition. When your listing is hidden behind a private agent network or tucked away on a non-public site, far fewer buyers ever see it. And if you're just, quote, testing the price, or what do they call it, aspirational pricing, that limited pool might not even give you a true read on your home's value. Some brokerages now are adding disclaimers that only their own clients can view your private exclusive. So it's not just behind an info wall, it's behind a buyer agent agreement wall. Number two, private exclusives could limit your buyer pool and your savings. If more brokerages start requiring buyers to sign representation agreements just to access their private exclusives, it could leave out unrepresented buyers or those working with low-cost brokers. Think about it. That could mean that sellers can miss out on serious buyers who could have brought better offers and asking for less closing cost coverage, including agent commission. And while there's little data to show that pocket listings save you money, there is growing concern that it might do the opposite. Number three, there's a big ordeal about, quote, days on the market and how it's so negative and hurtful to sellers. But here's the realistic part of this. Your days on the market's not going to be a secret. Even if the clock doesn't start until you go public, agents and buyers are smart enough to eventually trace how long your home was floating around on some private network and for how much. I mean, let's look at it this way. Within like a week of the NAR settlement and not sharing commissions, there were like 5 different websites already created showing who's sharing what commission and how. Someone's going to think it up and someone's going to do it. So what is the big difference if your home is listed on the market and drops price versus your home being a private exclusive at some high number and then listing at a lower number if someone's eventually going to find out that you tried for that price and didn't get it. The next one, privacy options kind of already exist. If you genuinely need privacy, you've kind of had some of those options. You had office exclusives. You could withhold your listing from public portals, or you can even sell privately with an attorney. Sellers can also require pre-screening buyers, excluding inside images of a listing, and even require that all showings be accompanied by the listing agent. You don't really need a fancy multi-phase marketing pitch to protect your identity and your privacy. I don't even know what number one, I forgot. But here's the next one. You need to be careful that you're not steered into dual agency. When your listing is only marketed within the brokerage, there's a much higher chance that the buyer's also coming from that same firm and possibly even your own agent. That sets up a dual agency situation where one agent or brokerage represents both sides. If it's the brokerage, sometimes it's called designated agency. But either way, while it may be legal in many states, it also means you're giving up full representation when your agent's going to represent both sides. And that's something you really strongly need to consider if giving up full representation is important in one of the biggest financial transactions of your life. And the last one that's still a gray area, but really important for you to be asking questions before you decide to do any sort of office private exclusive, because you could lose access later to have your home show on top real estate websites. Platforms like Zillow are going to be enforcing new rules in the next coming months on how and when your private listing could even appear. If your listing agent doesn't meet their guidelines, you might miss out on exposure to some of the biggest websites in real estate. At the end of the day, pocket listings often serve the brokerage more than the seller. They help the firms keep leads in-house, limit buyer competition, and maintain control of the transaction. And in today's post-lawsuit world, where more buyers are seeking lower fee agents or representing themselves, steering them into in-house deals could mean higher costs for them and more pressure on you to cover those costs. The bottom line is pocket listings shrink your audience, which could shrink your final offer too. A lot of these real estate companies are smart and loaded with marketing dollars, but they aren't smart enough to end the economic theory of supply and demand. And if you're a buyer, you got to know that some of these private listings are sometimes just bait. Let's be real. Many of these private, quote, off-market listings are being promoted you for one major reason: to bait you into working with the brokerage. You're told you're getting early access, but what you're really getting is steered and potentially pressured to overpay for a property. So here's what you need to watch out for. Exclusive access is going to come with strings. Agents may offer access to private listings only if you sign an agreement with them. And that agreement could lock you in for many months if you're not careful what you're reading. So what happens later if you find a home on your own or realize that agent isn't a right fit? Number 2, you could be walking yourself right into dual agency. In a dual agency situation, your agent can't fully advocate for your best interests, help you negotiate or craft deals, because they're also tied to the seller. Number 3, you need to be careful because you might end up overpaying. Some of these listings often come with, quote, aspirational pricing. Without the visibility and competition of the open market, there's no pressure for the seller to price realistically. And a bad agent won't stop you from overpaying. But more importantly, if pocket listings get bigger and take over more market share, the search is going to get harder for you. As more brokerages build their own listing platforms and hold back homes from the MLS, you'll be forced to search across multiple websites, apps, and networks just to see what's actually available. That means more logins, more mailing lists, and more homes that you're not going to know about. Not to mention potentially more buyer-agent agreements. The more you know, the harder it'll be for you to be manipulated. Ask the right questions. Don't rush. And remember, exclusivity should not come at the cost of transparency or your wallet. So let's go back to Zillow for a minute and understand why some consumer advocates are cautiously backing Zillow on pocket listings. Groups like the Consumer Policy Center and CARE have openly been critical of Zillow's model in the past, including the way it monetizes buyer leads and influences commission structures. So why now would they be supporting Zillow's recent move to push back on pocket listings? It's not about siding with Zillow. And trust me, it was very, very hard for me to put myself on the side of them. because we all know how I feel about how they make money. But it's about setting guardrails and making sure consumers aren't being misled about what a pocket listing really means. Without pushback or strong policies, the rise of pocket listings threatens to fragment the housing market even further. Instead of buyers and sellers having access to a centralized open marketplace, homes for sale would be scattered across dozens of broker controlled platforms, hidden behind logins, lead forms, buyer agency agreements, or never even publicly marketed at all. The level of fragmentation creates confusion, limits transparency, and hurts the very people consumer advocates are trying to protect. Buyers trying to shop fairly, and sellers trying to reach the full market. So let's be clear, this is not an endorsement of Zillow by any way, shape, or form, but it is a warning about where the market's headed without rules and guide rails. Sometimes the uncomfortable truth is this: when the largest real estate portal in the country makes a move that happens to slow the spread of hidden inventory, even their critics can agree that it's probably a step in the right direction. All right, here's the thing. I'm just going to say it as we sum this up. It is really hard being on the consumer advocacy side of real estate because we see what gets whispered behind closed doors, and then we see the shiny, sanitized version that gets served up to you, the consumer. And those two stories almost never match. It's like you're watching a movie trailer for like a really happy-go-lucky, feel-good rom-com, and then you're realizing that you're actually in some kind of crazy psychological thriller. This real estate industry is massive, it's powerful, and it makes a lot of money off of you. And at the end of the day, that's priority number one for a lot of these companies: profit. Not people, not consumer protection, not fairness, just profit. And here's where it gets off balanced. The thing is, this whole industry is built around something that's not a luxury. It's not a handbag, it's housing. It's a basic human need. And when decisions are made based on maximizing commissions, profit, or controlling inventory, instead of helping people find a safe place to live, that's a problem. And that's when we speak up here. Hopefully, this podcast helps you pull back the curtain a little bit to help you make better, smarter, informed decisions, not based on who has the best pitch, flashiest ads, but based on facts and real understanding of what the motive is behind each of these companies. Because in real estate, you're not just buying or selling a house, you're navigating an industry built to protect itself. And the more you know, the better you can protect yourself. I'm Wendy. This is the Real Estate Replay, and I will see you next time, hopefully soon, because good Lord, I got a lot going on. And maybe even you'll find out what the Easter egg is for Rebel. See you next time.